Good afternoon, guys. This is week number 4, and I hope you had an amazing weekend. So, per usual, I'm gonna give you some feedback concerning what you submitted already, and then I'm gonna cover chapter 6, and of course, I'm gonna remind you what you have for Sunday. Before I forget, I have to talk to our student athletes tomorrow, so I need to move our office hours from tomorrow, Tuesday, to Wednesday. Okay, same hours, so from 8 to 12:30, but not tomorrow. I have to move them to Wednesday. However, if you need to meet with me tomorrow for whatever reason and it is urgent, please let me know and we will schedule something special, specific for you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share our Moodle site. Let's see, there we go. So for today, we had to submit LO 7, 8, and 9. And I have my notes right here. I don't have a specific item to address concerning none of those 3 LOs. Pretty high scores, LO 7 average score 95%, and for LO 8 and LO 9 both at 92%. So pretty good, right? Thank you, appreciate that. We have a couple of students that struggle, and I can tell that they don't spend a lot of time working on the LO. Please study the material more and spend some more time, since you're seeing that whatever you're doing so far is not working that well. Okay, so if that's you, and you see that the scores are not as high as you would like them to be, please spend some more time studying the material and some more time when you're working on the whatever LO we have for that week. For next week, we have 3 LOs, LO 10, 11, and 12. And what I'm going to cover today is chapter 6, which is exactly that, general principles of exercise prescription. Okay, that noise is the AC, so I apologize in advance. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to share a PowerPoint slideshow. There we go. Okay, so general principles of exercise prescription. I've said that a lot of times during 212, and I say, I keep saying throughout my courses that when we're prescribing exercise, it is customized, it is individualized, so do not copy the same workouts regimens for a lot of people. That's at least unethical and unprofessional, if not dangerous. Okay, so before we start this chapter, I just want to say again that these are guidelines of how to prescribe something that it is customized. All right? Okay. So the general principles are, again, the Fit VP. They used to be Fit, and then they added the V and P part. So we have frequency, intensity, time type, volume, and progression. All this that we're going to talk about today is for apparently healthy individuals. Okay, we're going to talk about chronic diseases and all kinds of other conditions as we go on. This is for most likely the majority of the cases you're going to see. right? Unless you're working in a clinical environment, that's different, all right? Now, these are for apparently healthy individuals. For clinical cases or other conditions, special populations, we have special guidelines. Cool? All right. Okay, so what we need to know in general is we have mainly 4 components to deal with: aerobic, resistance, flexibility, and neuromotor exercise, right? Well, those are important for everybody, and those are kind of the pillars of any kind of exercise prescription, because those are more about physical fitness and health, and that's important for everybody. Okay, so we're talking more about the health-related components of physical fitness that we've covered, you know, in 212, but also in the beginning of this semester in 214. It's exactly what we covered. Now, these are important for everybody, especially nowadays that we are spending a lot of time just not being physically active. So one of the goals of our program should be to be designed in a way that decreases those periods of physical inactivity. Okay. What I want to add here is that the very first dash we pretty much understand, we know, is that, you know, if you're living a sedentary lifestyle, you have an increased risk for CVD and so on and so forth. The part that we didn't know until recently, and we know now, is that even if you're meeting the PA guidelines, right? But for the rest of the day, you're living a sedentary lifestyle, like me, sitting on a chair in front of a desk, typing, computer, stuff like that, you still get the effects of the sedentary lifestyle. So you have to be really careful, because being sedentary, you can hit those guidelines, but also you can be sedentary at the same time. Okay, so in general, we'll have to think, yes, PA guidelines, cool, but also for the rest of the day, try to stay active. Try to avoid those sedentary activities. Okay. We have warm up, we have cool down, which you know, and then we have in the middle that conditioning phase. Of course, if we have warm up and we'll have cool down, we have less probability for musculoskeletal injuries. Okay, you know that already. Could we have any kind of, is there any risk of CVD complications? Yes. Yes, especially for middle-aged and older adults. However, we talked about that in chapter 2 and 3. There is a specific screening process, pre-participation, right? If we need to refer them, we'll refer them. There are specific tests. We talked about the algorithm. We talked about PARQ Plus. We talked about a lot of ways to minimize that risk, right? In any case, if we do that and we start light, that's safe, right? And then gradually progress. Bone health is important, bone density, especially in older adults and women, and resistance training or any kind of weight-bearing exercise or anything that puts weight or load, let me say load better, on our bones is very welcome. Okay, here we go again with the AC. So that's important. We need to remember that. You know this already. We talked about warm up, cool down. Stretching can go either in the warm up or part of the cool down. Also, the more intense the conditioning phase, the more the warm up and the more the cool down, right? Or the longer the conditioning phase, also, the more the warm up and the more the cool down. Hope that makes sense. Frequency, we say 3 to 5. Okay, you can do more. Okay, it's okay for some cases. Vigorous intensity in more than 5 weeks, 5 times per week, increase the incidence of musculoskeletal injury. So we need to be careful. That's not for everybody. So high frequency and high intensity is something that we'll be aware of. This is something that we know. We just covered moderate intensity aerobic exercise done at least 5 days per week, or vigorous intensity at least 3 weeks, or some kind of combination. Okay. Positive dose response relationship. There's a dose response relationship that says what? The more we do, the more benefits we get in general. Okay. So that's positive. So if one goes up, the other one goes up as well. So if we increase intensity, we get more benefits. And of course, depending on the person though, there's a minimum threshold. So above that threshold, we get those benefits or not. So it depends on the individual based on training age, physiological age, and sex, injuries, so on and so forth. Now, interval training has been studied a lot lately. There's a lot of interest. And not only for, today we're going to talk about apparently healthy individuals, but we'll see later on in the semester that it has been proven beneficial for people with chronic diseases as well, like CVD. Anyway, concerning apparently healthy individuals, it has been shown that it improves CRF, cardiorespiratory fitness levels, right, and the cardiometabolic biomarkers. So that is great, even shorter, less than 3 months, 3 months or less of interval training. And what is interval? It has to do with changing the intensity throughout the same workout, right? We'll have high, low. What else? Yeah, so at least for this class, when there's heat and there's seat. Seat is a type of heat. Sit is when you sprint, right, in that high intensity part. So it's like the all-in kind of heat. So that's more intense. That has been shown beneficial as well, right? Heat, at least for this class, is a change between high and low, but we're not talking about all-in as in sprint. That's in a box in our book. You can see the intensities of the heart rate reserve, which we have already covered, and VO2R, and we're going to cover later on. You see what's moderate, well, you see what's vigorous, and you see what is like. You need to remember those things, right? But you see the benefits we get based on intensity, also the benefit we get due to interval training exercise. So this table right here has a lot of information, right? It has cardio information about CRF, but also on the all the way to the right column has to do with resistance exercise. So on the left column all the way to the left, the first column is intensity from very light all the way to near maximum. Okay, all right, and then we have relative intensity. Then we have intensity as a percentage of VO2 max relative to maximal exercise capacity METs, of absolute intensity by age, and then the relative intensity of resistance exercise. The relative intensity of resistance exercise, pretty self-explanatory. You see the percentages. For example, 50 to 69% of your 1 RM, that would be considered moderate intensity in resistance training. Okay? Now, if we see here in the relative intensity, so we go to the second column from the left, we see the percentages of HRR and VO2R. Then we move, as we move to the right, to the HR max percentage, and then VO2 max percentage. And then also we go to RP, which is from 6 to 20. And that's another thing you need to remember. So 12 to 13, that's moderate. Okay? Now, as a percentage of VO2 max, and relative to the METs that you can do. As you can see there, 34% or 57% or 44%, depending on how METs, that's very light. Absolute intensity. We know that jogging is 7% around, or running, let's say 7%, 7 METs, sorry. That would be vigorous intensity. So if you know the METs of an exercise, right, then you know the intensity, but that's the absolute intensity. The relative intensity also always, as you can see, has something, a percentage attached to it. So then you can compare and contrast between people. Absolute intensity by age, you see what's moderate for middle age, that's 4 to 5.9, right? So this is a nice table to see a lot of information that has to do with intensity for cardiorespiratory and resistance exercise all together. All right. Now, how can we measure absolute intensity? Calories, VO2, and METs. We have talked about the definitions of these. They're later on as we go in this slideshow. Please know these definitions, and if you don't, go over them again and again and again, okay? These are the relative, and again, as you can see, there are percentages next to those acronyms, right? Intensity, now we have some other ways to do it as well. We have RPE, 6 to 20, multiplied 1 to 10. We have the effective balance. That's more about psychology and is about if you're feeling good or bad, right? The Omni scale, which is from 1 to 10, from easy to difficult. So sometimes it's laminated and you show it to your client and they just point, right? The talk test, we talked about the talk test. Like if you cannot talk to the person next to you as you're running, that's high intensity. And then the feeling scale is from -5, or like very bad, to +5, which is very good. 0 is neutral. And again, it's how do you feel? Those are, these scales are important as well, okay? When we're talking about HR max, how we can figure that out? Well, usually we use the Fox's formula, 220 minus 8, but it's not very accurate. So usually it's -10, ±10 beats per minute off, which is a lot. You see Astra, you see Tanaka. Tanaka we used a lot, right? Which is 2.8, 208 minus 0.7 times 8. So it really depends on which formula we're using. There are plenty of formulas out there. These are the methods for HRR. So HRR would be HR max minus HR rest. If you multiply it by the intensity, then you get the target heart rate. So if you want to go up to 85%, you put HR max minus HR rest times 0.85, right? The same for VO2R, the same for heart rate, the same for VO2, and the same for METs. Okay? Study those boxes. Let me know if you have any questions. Here we have the metabolic formulas. So here, you don't need to remember those. But they may give them to you if you're actually taking the test. And you need to be able to apply. So take the scenario that they're giving you and put those numbers in those formulas and figure out the right answer. Now, there's a lot of information as footnotes. Make sure you know that information, because without that, you can't really use what they give you. And then go one by one. We usually do a couple of them in class. It's more difficult to do it right now, but take a piece of paper and then try to do the same things and make sure you get the same result. They're not difficult. Go step by step, go back to the table, look down here. If you have any questions, how to find the grade. For example, you see that 10% is 0.10. So that's how you put it in the formula, right? And also make sure you know which formula you're using. If you're walking, you're using this formula. If you're running, you're using this formula, and so on and so forth. So make sure you know how to apply those formulas. Those are the metabolic calculations, and that's it. You don't need to remember, excuse me, the table. This is just a diagram figure to show you that they found the VO2 max, which was at 38. You go all the way up, the last dot, 38, and the heart rate was 184. And from that, you can see the best fit. That was the best fit line that they drew over there. They can find, for example, the 50% of that, which would be 19 milliliters per kilo per minute, and at 130 beats per minute. So just another way to use formulas to find from 100% to 50%. Time, how much time? Okay, 30 to 60 minutes of moderate, 20 to 60 of vigorous, or a combination. Okay, you kind of knew that. But if you want to lose weight or maintain weight that you lost, more could be prescribed depending on the individual. Do I have to do, let's say, those 30 minutes per day all at once? Well, we used to think that. We don't think that anymore. You can break it down as long as you reach that 30 minutes. So you can see that usually bouts of 10 minutes, but for really people who are very inactive, even less. 5 minutes could be something that they could start from, right? I think we've covered this. Let's just put together here the duration with the intensity and the bounce. Type, rhythmic, aerobic type exercise involving large muscle groups are recommended for improving cardiorespiratory fitness, which we know already. Now, we've covered that before, A, B, C, and D. That's another way to group exercises. An easy way to remember A, they can be low intensity. They are the ones that are like the low intensity ones, so that's for everybody. B are not for everybody, so they have to be fit enough to go to B, vigorous intensity. C, you can see there's a skill required. I cannot prescribe swimming if you don't know how to swim. I cannot prescribe skiing if you don't know how to skate, or and so on and so forth. You understand what I'm trying to communicate here. And then D, it is again vigorous intensity, but we usually use it as supplementary. So do this and then just go play to pick up games at the YMCA per week, right? Then it's fun, right? All right, you know this already. Volume. So in order to figure out the volume per week, we will multiply frequency, intensity, and time. Okay, and it can be estimated from the gross energy expenditure. One way to do it is MET per minutes per week, and one other way to do it is kilocalories per week. So if one week I'm at 500 kilocalories, and next week I'm at 600, that means volume went up, right? Okay, that's one way to do it. This is the definition of MET. We talked about it. We talked about rest. Everybody's MET is 1, which is 3.5 milliliters per kilo per minute, right? Then if you want to find from METs, the METs per minute, that's not that hard. We're going to give an example right there at the bottom. And then from METs per minute, you can go to kilocalories per minute and then per week, okay? So as you can see, if you go to the example, jogging is around 7 METs. If you multiply that for 30 minutes, 3 times per week, and we have a 70 kilo male, okay? So 7 METs times 30 times 3, 630 METs per week. So next week, if I go to 640, I increased volume. If I go to 620, I decrease the volume. I don't know. It doesn't matter if we talk about volume. You can go and manipulate any of those three variables: the METs, intensity, right? The minutes per session per day, or the frequency per week. So you can have whatever number by manipulating one of those three variables or all of them. And then if you have the METs per minute, you see the formula that you don't have to remember. So 7 METs times 3.5 milliliters per kilo per minute times 70, because that's his weight, divided by 1,000. Why? Because that's the formula, which is right there in the third paragraph. That has to do with kilocalories, and times 5. So you get 8,500 kilocalories per minute, or 8.5, sorry. And then you multiply that by 30, by 3, and then by 3, and you get how many kilocalories you burn, or you use, or you consume per week. So again, by knowing this number, you can decide if your volume went up or down this week and what you can do next week. All right. Again, dose response association or relationship, the more you do, the more benefits. We usually talk about 500 to 1,000 METs per minute per week. Pedometers are an easy way to measure quantity. Okay, we usually talk about 10,000 steps. However, most of the pedometers overestimate a little bit. That's what we just covered. Now, the rate of regression, the recommended rate of regression depends. This is my favorite answer on the individual, right? Start, play it safe, start easy, add 5 to 10 minutes every 1 or 2 weeks, depending again on the individual. Just play it safe. This is all the information that we just talked about the cardiovascular part of exercise prescription. Now, let's move to the second part, the second of the 4, which is muscular fitness, right? By muscular fitness, we usually talk about strength and endurance here. Now, an important part is as you grow older, we'll lose power. And that's really important in terms of quality of life, or in terms of being functional, in terms of falling. So if you really think about it, I'm not going to give you the answer, but think, as you grow older, which type of muscle fibers do you think you lose more? Type 1 or type 2? Remember, you're losing power, okay? Cover that. Frequency, we should hit the same muscle group 2 to 3 days, 3 times per week, right? And we should at least allow 2 full days, 48 hours between sessions of the same muscle group so we can recover. Frequency depends. You can do whole body workouts. You can split lower body, upper body. You can do all kinds of pull, push, whatever. It really depends on your level, on the frequency, like your availability, equipment, and so on. Types. There's so many types, right? We cover them in class. Machines, free weights, kettlebells, bands, sandbags, med balls. You can do all kinds of, you can use a lot of different machines to practice muscular fitness. Now, should you go for multi-joint or single joint? We usually say multi-joint. However, when we need to be more specific and target a specific group, single joint are great as well. In everyday life, though, in the majority of time, we use our body in a way we don't use just one joint per se. Most of the time we use multiple joints. So that's why multi-joint exercises are more functional. Muscle imbalances, agonist versus antagonist, right? So here we need to exercise in a way that we are avoiding muscle imbalances. And sometimes we fix muscle imbalances that happen because of your sport being the way it is, tennis, one-sided, or you wearing heels all the time, or the way you're sitting, or because typing, right, all the time, the extensors and the flexors right here. So it doesn't mean that we're creating balances all the time because we are training the way we're training. That's one case. In other cases, we use training to fix imbalances, okay? Yeah, it's multiple. We talked about that with 2 to 4 sets. No, we didn't. So now we're talking about sets and repetition. 2 to 4 sets. You see the resting interval, 2 to 3 minutes. It really depends. Doesn't. We're not going to go into detail. It depends on the individual. This is something to just help you start prescribing exercise, and then you'll figure out more as you go. 4 sets better than 2. Intensity and number of reps, of course, are inversely related, which means the higher the intensity, which means the higher the percentage of your 1 rep, which means the higher the weight, the lower the number of repetitions in the same set. Proper form always. Muscular endurance, you see, we have more reps. You know this. Older and very deconditioned, you start with light and more reps, and then usually you add weight. Okay. Okay. Breathing and muscular fitness, as you can see there, exhalation during the concentric phase, inhalation during the eccentric phase. Avoid Valsalva maneuver, right? We talked about Valsalva maneuver. I hope you remember. If you don't, go back, look it up. Expiration with a closed eyes, right? Okay, full run. Nothing really crazy here. How can we manipulate or increase overload? One is resistance. Another way is through sets. Another way is reps. Another way is frequency, training sessions per week. Okay? Not necessarily all of them at once, but you get the point. We've talked about this. This is a table that puts together all the information for muscular fitness. All right, flexibility, another component of the health-related, another health-related component of muscular fitness. So range of motion can be improved, and that would be the goal of flexibility, of course. In all age groups, we have acute and chronic improvement, which means right after I do some flexible exercise, I see some improvement, but also if I keep doing it, I see some chronic effects, some improvement that comes after a long period of doing this kind of training. That's the goal of flexibility program. We covered that before. Also, we covered the second dot. I'm just going to remind you, static stretching and strength and power they may not go together. They may not go together, which means if you really flex statically, you may lose power. Excuse me, up to an hour after that. So be careful if you are participating in a sport or in an activity that you need explosiveness. maybe you should do dynamic before. Okay. We usually talk about 30 seconds, as you can see. A total of 60 per joint is recommended, 2 to 3 days per week. Okay. Now, many types of flexibility. We talked about the ballistic. We don't like them a lot unless they're specific to you and your activity or sport. Dynamic, yes. Static, we talked about static, and one thing that is concerning, right? And then we have active and passive static. Passive, it doesn't mean you're always using a partner. You can use a device as an elastic band. And then we also have covered P and F. This is the table that includes all the information about flexibility. And the last part for this slideshow and for today is neuromotor, associated with what we call functional fitness, right? Improvements in balance, agility, and muscle strength. Very beneficial for older adults. If you've ever trained older adults, you know what I'm talking about. We don't have a lot of data concerning neuromotor exercise, so we don't have a lot of specific suggestions concerning the FIT-FIT-P principle. But we usually say 2 to 3 days per week. Okay. This is a table putting together everything we know so far. As you will see, some things they're not very well known. So the next edition has a little bit more information about that. Brief activity breaks can be very beneficial if you are living a sedentary lifestyle. Okay, and I already covered that you may be hitting those PA guidelines, but if for the rest of the day you're not really doing anything, you're just sitting down, you may lose the benefits that you're getting if you actually meet the recommended minimum PA guidelines. Okay, and that was for today. So I hope you enjoyed it. I want to wish you a great week. Before wrapping this up, no synchronous meeting this week. Office hours on Wednesday, not Tuesday, from 8 to 12:30, and you have LOs 10 to 12 until Sunday midnight. All right, guys. Let me know if you need anything. If I don't see you on Wednesday, I'll be sending you another video next Monday. In the meantime, lift intentionally, not habitually.